SVG's Jason Dackman. I'm here with former chairman of CBS Sports and at one time CBS News as well, Sean McManus, and a Sports Broadcasting Hall of Famer. Sean, first and foremost, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
So you obviously have built just a unparalleled career on your own, but before you entered the fray, you were a little kid running around the control room for your dad, Jim McKay, obviously one of the most iconic broadcasters of all time. This month, September 5th, a new film from Paramount Pictures is being released that recounts some of the events of the 1972 Munich games that were obviously a tragedy, but also a moment that changed sports and news coverage. You were there. You were there with your dad, Jim McKay. Let's start with when the news broke that hostages were being taken at the games in the Olympic Village. Where were you with your dad at that time?
Well, my dad, when ABC Sports tried to get hold of him to come in and anchor the news coverage or the coverage of the hostage taking, I was in my hotel room. My dad was supposed to have a day off. It was the one day between gymnastics, which he was covering, and track and field. He had one day off. He was down at the pool doing his laps, as he always did every morning, and Jeffrey Mason of ABC Sports, who was in control at the time, got hold of him and said, "You got to come in here." And my dad said, "It's my day off. What's going on?" He said, "Something potentially really bad is happening in the Israeli quarters." So my dad went in. He called my room, told me he was going in. About an hour later, I took the subway to the Olympic Village, walked into the ABC studios at around 11:30 in the morning, and stayed there until 3:30 the next morning when my dad finished his coverage. So I was watching the men and women of ABC Sports who I had seen since I was an 8-year-old boy. I'd seen them covering all sorts of sporting events. They were now covering one of, if not the biggest news event of the year, live to an audience of 900 people. And we have to think back to 1972, which was only 27 years after the end of the Holocaust. And the Germans were trying to make the Olympics the, quote, serene Olympics. The guards wore blue suits. They didn't carry guns. So this was just so incredibly traumatic, obviously, for everybody. And my dad, who was not assigned to be the anchor of the Olympics, he was assigned to do track and field and gymnastics, was thrust into this position of anchoring coverage, which in the end went to 900 million people around the world. And I sat there in the studio next to him, standing actually, or standing in the back of the control room, watching these men and women perform under the most difficult circumstances, and the performance that they did and the way they covered it and the job my dad did is part of television history.
No question about it. And again, the new film, September 5th, chronicles those events from ABC Sports production team's perspective. First of its kind film that looks at an event that's been covered heavily. In order to do that, the cast and the director and some of the crew were looking to get some inside knowledge on how a control room worked. You just happened to oversee a handful of control rooms when you were chairman of CBS Sports. Can you tell us a little bit about how you connected the cast and crew with the facilities to give them that kind of experience?
Well, remarkably, the CBS Sports crew welcomed me into their production rooms, and obviously I spent a lot of my time in there. No, I got a call from Jeffrey and Ken Agard, and saying, would it be okay if the actor, John Magaro, who's playing Jeff Mason, and the director and perhaps a producer come into the CBS Sports control room? I said, absolutely. So they came in on a Sunday during NFL coverage. They were in the control room for a number of hours. I think it really gave John, who was playing Jeffrey Mason, a really good feel of what it was like to be in a control room. Obviously today, so much bigger, so much more sophisticated. But basically the director and the producer and the associate director and the head of operations is basically doing the same thing today that they were doing in 1972, albeit now with a lot more equipment and a lot more technology. We took them for a tour of the entire facility, including the room where the highlights were cut. They spent 3 or 4 hours in our facilities, and I think that really gave John a feeling for the language, which has been cleaned up a lot since 1972, for the language and the interaction between the executive producer or the producer and the talent, how the producer talks to the director, how the associate director talks to the director. It was all done, and I would urge everyone to see the film. It was all done, and it feels really authentic that you are in the ABC Sports control room on September 5th in 1972. They did a remarkable job.
Yeah, and again, the replication of that control room, some of the equipment that they were able to track down and rebuilt it from the original blueprints. It's just amazingly impressive. You mentioned it, and I've seen it too. It's quite the experience. Was there anything that really stuck out? You've seen it a couple times, I believe, now. When you saw the film, was there anything that really stuck out? And what was it like to see the real footage? Again, no one's playing your dad. Your dad is playing himself in the archival footage. What was it like to see that as part of a dramatic reenactment?
It was amazing, and I know when the director talked to Jeff Mason about being involved. Jeff, obviously, is one of the men in charge during this terrible day. He said, any ideas on who can play Jim McKay? And Jeff Mason said, if you cast Jim McKay, I'm out. He's the only one who can't be cast. He's got to, as you said, play himself through the archival footage. And it is, when you see him in there, exhausted, giving the final word that all 11 hostages had been killed. When you see him give those final words, you truly understand that no one else could have possibly played that role the way my dad did. But many moments in the film stick out to me. His final words, obviously, they're all gone. When Jeff and the early morning crew before dawn hear the gunshots and don't know what they are, that's amazing. When the German police burst into the control room with machine guns drawn, telling them to take down the feed because there was a fear that the terrorists could watch the coverage of the snipers crawling along the roof, which ABC was broadcasting to a worldwide audience. So they came in and they said, turn it off, turn it off. They turned it off for about 5 minutes, and then Rune said, put it back up, and it stayed up.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sean, I really appreciate you taking the time. We know how busy you are and also what a legacy you've left in the industry, but to see your dad on screen and to relive these moments through a film like this, I'm sure is pretty surreal. So thanks so much for recounting it.
Emotional and surreal. Thanks for the time.